Just for you to know, we started recording the session. So we can have these recordings to post in our website.
Did you accept everyone? I think there are persons waiting, maybe.
There are still people coming in.
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah, so
Okay.
you've got Amy just joining. I'll carry on admitting.
I think Rosanna is also trying to come in. Let's see if we can bring her because she had problems coming in the
Well, I
last
tell you
time.
what, Luciana, I'll make you a co-host so you can admit people as well.
Oh, possibly Fernando's already as one. He can accept people.
Yeah, exactly, just in case I miss anybody.
Okay.
Okay. Pues bienvenidos, bienvenidas, bienvenides a esta sesión que es...
So welcome you all to this session. This is the 6th or 7th of a series of events about mobility, women mobility and immobility. In the second session last December, we had members of a feminist collective that is Hermanas en la Sombra that work with women, former imprisoned women in the city of in Morelos, in Cuernavaca. We have Elena and Aida here present. They talked about this very special character, Dr. Alfonso, that we will meet today. So welcome, Alfonso, and to introduce him, I will pass the floor to Elena, my Mexican sister. Thank you very much, Lucy. It is really a pleasure to be a team with you. What you propose and what we propose is always discussed and accepted, is a relationship with very goodwill from both parts and affection. And my heart is exploding of joy of presenting my dear friend that is an integrant of the Morelense community, very well known, well respected, with an amazing path. And now we have the pleasure to have him to give us an overview of all the programs and social interventions, let's call it, in some of which we could help. So, and we hope in many more in this strategy we currently have in our collective to connect with other collectives and share our knowledge. So I tried to summarize his curriculum, but it's really hard. So I will mention the most relevant points. So, as considering his plural and interesting background and education and polyfaceted, because things that seem not related, but at the end of the day, it creates a very interesting set. He is a pharmacobiologist with master degree in sciences and another one in informatic new technologies, two PhDs, one in biomedic investigation and doctor PhD in pharmacy. Alfonso, in 1997, was ordained as the Church of the Metropolitan Community, and in 2008 he became Bishop of Nuestra Señora de Guadalupe Church, that is Catholic Apostolic, Roman Apostolic Catholic, and currently this church is the Catholic Church of Rio de la Plata. He will explain the very special characteristic of this denomination. And since 1993, he is academic in the economic science of UNAM, the Autonomous University of Mexico. And his production, his scientific production, Dr. Alfonso Salas, is very brought. In the last few years, he published a total of 47 papers, among them when he's cited or he is the main author, and also lab papers and lab work providing knowledge in graduation, undergraduation in the University of Cuernavaca. And the set of organizations he belongs are three. The old Rio de la Plata Catholic Church, where he is bishop, registered in the governance secretariat, the diverse collective, where he will explain the beautiful job he conducts, and Together and Embraced, which is another association he is part. In addition to offer religious services as mass, and he also carry out social community labor with the LGBTQIA plus communities, fighting hate due to sexual and gender identity, working in human rights in this area. He also has a very important and broad activity in prevention and detection of HIV, the virus of human immunodeficiency virus that may lead to AIDS, coordinating and taking food for people who live with this virus. And above all of that, as he had emergent actions like the indigenous insurgents. He fed the Zapatist Liberation Army. During the earthquakes, he also, in 97, he involved the communities. In recently, during the pandemics, we took part for some weeks together with him in a popular canteen in Cuernavaca, where we have vulnerable people. And there we also had the opportunity, thanks to the funds from our European brothers and sisters, we could support women from our collective group that were unemployed. So it is this amazing synergy. When we talk to him, this is his history. So welcome, dear Alfonso. We have here our sisters from other universities in Brazil and across the oceans. Thank you, Elena, for the presentation, Lucy and team that made possible my presence here, trying to talk a little bit about my experience and my path in this life. I'm working in social activism for 40 years in all the areas Elena mentioned. And my energy and my objective was, I always asked, why do people suffer? Why do they have to suffer in life? In the end of because as I had a different sexual identity, I grew up suffering due to fear of not being accepted, that my family, I, I isolated from my family because this has a major influence in our personality, and we have to change this. This expression of sexuality, people that live this diverse sexuality, is sad. We suffer a lot. And something that really marked me is being rejected by my father. This, the need that I had of his embrace, his acceptance. He was my father. And all of that affected my person, and I want to convey that and explain why do I have all this energy, why do I dedicated my life to learning and understanding and dedicate to people of diverse sexual orientation, because it is important that they took part in every activity. I don't want to be what they told me a homosexual was, because the idea the people has of homosexuals is ridiculous. Is that the person that is made fun of, that is humiliated? So this is a sadness I don't want. And why do people do that? I give myself to all people that are close to spirituality, and in my case to Jesus Christ. This in the change of the transition from childhood, when I was 5 years old, I was trying to understand, why am I different? Why do I need to be accepted and embraced by my father? This is very deep that I want to convey, so you understand my path that led to my objectives. As I grew up, I always studied two things at once, because I want to be a person that could prove my family and people that I'm dignified and I'm honored, and I made huge efforts to always achieve that in my through study and preparation. Since childhood, I was studying English, French, the elementary, middle school, high school, and when I was 17, due to family reasons, I had to leave my family. I have due to I was shamed and I was in fear, and it was terrible. And my family didn't even notice. We never mentioned this openly. And I'm talking about this for 60 years. I'm now 70 years old, and now I can speak openly about my path, about my life, and my pursuit for balance. Always trying to do the best of my life, to be an apostle in my life. So this was my path. This is when I started my life. When I was 22 years old, I reconciliated with my father. After leaving home, I had the opportunity of I left a very difficult, I had a very difficult trial of death. My father was ill, he had cancer. He embraced me and he said, embraced me without saying a single word. I understood him. He knew, but didn't knew how to express himself. So we reconciliated, and this made me extremely happy, because my father really loved me. So I started studying and preparing and being independent, and all my academic preparation since undergraduation, I do it myself by working with, and that's how I started in life. This was my dream. And when I finished the undergraduation, I had a degree in biology and pharmaceuticals, and I was always working and studying. This was the way of maintaining my studies and adapting and dedicating time to integrate to what I was seeking. Then I achieved master's degree at the Autonomous University of Mexico, where I'm part for 45 years in my academic investigation in the Autonomous University of Mexico, that we say that is the best, nationally speaking, is the most recognized one. And also in the state of Morelos. And I developed my work in pharmacy, and due to the need to understand this new area that was emerging, informatics, I studied that. In parallel, I had my work in social activism, when I start to notice the attack of churches, of any church, any Christian church, Catholic church, teaching hate to other different sexual orientations, identities. So I started to prepare and understand, what do I feel in the love of God? And in 1970, there was a revolution. If you can tell me how the time, someone help me in timekeeping and tell me, so I can approach every topic and have two. You have another 20, about 20 minutes. Yeah, 20, 25. But I also have a PowerPoint presentation that Elena sent me. Would you like me to share for you? Or are you sharing your screen? If you can share it for me, uh, if you can help me, it's less than 30 minutes in the topics that I want to address. So I will share my screen and you tell me to advance or yes, these are, well, each minute you can skip slides and pass slides. So in my guide, I talk about the revolution of spirituality in the world level. In the 70s, a character called Trump Perry decided to banish homosexuals from their church because Jesus Christ supposedly hate homosexuality. And through the studies, we reached the conclusion that neither in the Old Testament or the New one, there's something against homosexuality. This was accepted in all cultures as something cultural. In the year 400 after Christ is when the hate against this sexual orientation started. So in Rome, up to a certain stage, it was accepted, but then as of the year 400, we started to face homophobia. So in the 70s, we started this revolution with this church in Mexico, and in 1983, we created 4 churches: Guadalajara, Monterrey, Mexico City, and Cuernavaca. This is in Cuernavaca. I was there in Cuernavaca doing my master's degree in 84, 85. And I have to say that these were very hard years. We were 6 or 7 people that have to fight to get in a church. When we started, it was something that was humiliating because police was persecuting people in the streets just for being different. And this made people hide. We hide in our way to be and feel because we can be even killed by this very policy, this very police that was the system controlling everything. And the the crime was just to be for being different. And this was the reason for repressing all this expression in Mexico, in our country, but generally speaking in the world. Then we had this revolution in 40 years changed everything, that now we legislate in favor of a gay marriage, the adoption of children by gay couple, gender identity, and all the rights to make justice to certain groups that were marginalized, among them people with sexual diversity. Here in the screen, we have the first march, the first rally in Morelos, the first of many. and the first cultural and diversity week, where many people took part, many groups from our city, and where we made clear there are children there, boys and girls. There's a boy to my left. Now she's 23, has a child of 2 years, and but even sharing my life with her, she didn't make her homosexual. And this made in my life know this love of being a father, not as in a spiritual sense, but in a practical sense. Now she is finishing her degree. She has a 2-year-old child, and I'm very happy for her. And also being able to prove that the fact that children are raised by a homosexual couple does not make necessarily homosexual as well. They can be or not. This is a testimony that led to a documentary. I may send it to you. And I tell you that because we are still fighting to release people from these phobias, uh, to transgender people, to sex professionals, to all diversity, to open space, to legislate, to let to know these people. And among them, there are intellectual people that understand, support, and share these new ideas that for many people would be too complicated and difficult to understand. In the whole world, there is a good basis about the legislation on sexual preferences, sexual orientation. We are studying more, we are going into that, but we consider that all people have the same right to life, to the environment, to human rights, and to their spiritual capacity of being a human being as they are, as a spiritual being, of sharing among each other. This is our target. Something that I would like to mention was the HIV/AIDS epidemics during the 80s. In 87, I became the responsible in the church uh, for 1 year because there was still a fear of the disease. And due to the capacity of struggle that I had, I first denied, but this helped me a lot in my spiritual reconciliation with God and church, and rescuing this spirituality, because I realized I could help other people to understand themselves, to accept themselves, to feel to feel dignity and fight against homophobia. And this is how I started in my church. I prepared academically in theology. I studied theology in the United States and Mexico up to 97, when I became a minister of the church, a priest. And this was my pathway. I rented a house with my own resources. So people at that time, there was no public places to receive HIV/AIDS patients. So the church, considering religious, considering the services we have to provide, people looked for a place to have leisure, to be and to accept their sexual preferences. And then we started to have this openness to share with other people and say that the the police was expecting them outside, and many times we have to rescue people that were being taken by the police in the police cars. and say this is a church, this is a sacred place and people are safe here, this is a place to share. And because police just collecting people in the street, we took back them to from jail and took them back home. So this was a huge work of a lot of suffering, a lot of injustice. But during the AIDS epidemic, we left this issue of fight for a while to understand AIDS, because a lot of people started to get to be sick. Here in Morelos and Santa Cruz, we had two pictures here. One is a hostel where people would rest and die because there was no other place to accept them. Their families were banishing them from home. There was such a level of ignorance among our parents, children, our home, because people in their ignorance imagined something terrible, something extremely contagious, something morally repugnant. It was a shameful person. And they abandoned people in the streets, in the hospitals, and we took them to this hostel in Santa Cruz, where they had healthcare up to the time. There was no other way. There was no other medication. There was no antiretroviral viral drugs. There was just one in the beginning. We didn't have access because it was extremely expensive. So people knew they would die. And oftentimes I had to bury people isolated, take their coffins alone because there was no family member. So imagine the economic cost and the social stigma that little by little I try to find convenient with, for instance, the mortuaries to supply coffins, for instance, for to bury them. Not even that they had. Up to we get to 2001, we needed this hostel up to the year 2000. After the year 2000, the government started to supply funds for antiretrovirals, and people with HIV or AIDS not necessarily would die. And this is how we close such a hard and painful chapter of our history. But then we had the pandemics. It's a very similar reaction of people to nurses and doctors because they would be contagious. So the point here is not fighting against epidemics or pandemics, but against ignorance of people, that due to the lack of preparation, due to a lack of scientific academic knowledge of viral phenomenon or epidemics of or pandemics as social events. So this is when we were working for AIDS prevention in the Autonomous University of Mexico. The first exhibit of university HIV prevention. This is carried out in the whole university. I took part of it. I formed all these groups to guide youth within the university and in the city how not to get contaminated by HIV. This is still necessary. We need to work with young people. We started to have cases again after 12 years, because here in Morelos, the first sexual activity of boys and girls is around 12 years old. Well, we can't work with underage children because they would say, you are teaching my child to use condom, and this is sexual education. And what we are trying to teach them is not to get contaminated. So we have to work with parents as well, so their children do not contaminate, because their sexual expression will, even with teaching boys and girls at studying as of 12, their first sexual relations and sexual interactions. So we have to work, as they are underage, we have to work with their parents so they are aware, and work with their children for prevention, and create an army of children to work for HIV AIDS prevention. So we continue in the struggle. And then with COVID, there are some cases that I would like to highlight, which was helping people together with professors and teachers in Cuernavaca to create a front to supply food for people in the streets. And also having a hotline with psychologists, doctors, nurses, and all the professionals in healthcare professionals to help population. And this was also a hard work. And another very important revolution was a spiritual support, because people were dying, and the family couldn't attend their service, their burial. And this is something very cultural for Mexican people, to have this rites of passage with the dead. So this was a major change for us. We had masses and service through social media, so people could so we could give support to the families that were losing their members through social media, through a phone. They could see a mass, they could see a service, and say goodbye to their grandparents, to their mothers and fathers. And for many people in Mexico, it's very important to have this closure. And seeking a change that allowed us to adapt. Also, we had is virtual classes, the same as in other countries. Now we are more able to transmit talks and conferences. Pandemics made us work harder than before. In academic participation, in activism, in all the social problematics led us to this work. And well, I don't want to fail to say something very important, that the fact that now the community on sexual diversity, they are seeking us as a church, because we are performing weddings, at least 2 to 3 per week, where we provide counseling, where we provide spiritual support, because they lost church as an institution. Youth that attend our church, they lost their religious institution, the Catholics, Christian institutions, because, and I try to rescue this new infrastructure with a new and different vision, where we teach this personal relationship with God. And I help them rescue that, because at the end of the day, they will have children, and they have to supply value to their children. So when they understand the positive part as human beings that made them fall in love one another, rescue that this good feeling, this good feelings, to help raise their children, reconciliating with a deity that is different from what they were taught, in a personal spiritual relationship. This is very important, and I want to highlight, this is the future for children, for our church, where we see that there is a personal relationship with this deity that we lost because we failed as institution. But we as humans, we are spiritual beings. We have this need in all of us. So I believe that this openness is helping to rescue this personal spiritual feeling to be close to deity, to God. So this is the first role of my church, to have to give an opportunity for people to rescue their personal help, their personal faith at their way, in their culture. These two slides are videos. If you will, you can tap play. So this is in Cuernavaca with the LGBTQAI plus community, working in the International Day for fighting HIV/AIDS. Every year we have different acts in different places in the city where people take part, and we raise awareness to the problem. The previous one is also a video if you want to go back. And I would like to rescue the power of solidarity. And we were covering, we were raising resources to supply food together with Hermanas en la Sombra to provide food for those in need during the pandemics. This was a very good experience for me because these people were suffering, these women, they felt they were not accepted. When they were able to talk to other people that for other reason also are not accepted, they could join and had a very beautiful experience, united by suffering and by the need to help one another, to help someone else that was suffering. This for me is a way to grow. Suffering is a way to grow, and how to develop ourselves to be better people, to accept challenges and be more efficient. I don't know if I stop here or carry on. How are we in terms of time? Well, maybe we can open for those who want to make a question. Thank you very, very much, Alfonso. It was very interesting for me because we never met in person, but I heard a lot about you by Elena and Aida about your work. So it was really a pleasure to meet you, to hear all your stories. So you can ask in any language through the chat, or Aida says, well, can you talk a little bit about your work with Haitian immigrants? Because your talk is within a series that it's dedicated to mobilities, to women mobility and immobility. So it would be interesting to hear about the Haitian case. In our Farolito restaurants, popular restaurants, we started to receive people of color, Black people. In Cuernavaca, this is not the case usually, but Haitians were brought, 200 people, and they just went to Cuernavaca, and there's no immigration office there. They had no papers. They were just there without work, without food, and this was a way to get close to them. For the first time, we received in Cuernavaca a major group of immigrants, and I then learned that there were other immigrants from Central America and from Europe that were hidden, and they were very discreet because they didn't want to get to know, because they could be persecuted. Maybe sometimes they are refugees from their home countries. So it took a lot of work to communicate with them, because they have they have a program, a Criollo French, and Aida son that speak very good French helped us in translation, and we were able to communicate with them, including to know what type of food they like. We learned that they don't like tortillas, so they don't like. We started to give to produce bread and green bananas bread, and we learned how to cook their food, their own food, and help them with that. Help them to dress, supply medicine, and little by little, we were taking them to the city of Tijuana, that is a border with United States. Now we don't have that many in our, most of them are employed now, and they were able to survive this season. And most of them now is in Tijuana trying to go to US. But then we realized that our city can be also a place for immigrants, especially those coming from Central America, actually coming from all over the world. And I believe that we will have to work strongly in this area. And I take this opportunity to thank Aida that put us together with another group that also suffer a lot, that are those seeking for disappeared family members. In Cuernavaca, we are integrating church to supply a spiritual support for these people, and we will do that. And I'm trying to give a little bit of myself. I just started to learn about the situation and try to see how to give a more effective support for these people. Actually, we have more than 100,000 people disappeared that we don't know what the whereabouts. This is amazing. Thank you. Elena, do you have a question? You can open your microphone and do it directly. This is really moving to hear that when you talk from your heart and you start to review your own suffering, is when we get close to other people that share this deep feeling, and giving access to spirituality to groups that are marginalized and excluded is also and something else that is very beautiful in Alfonso, that he also works with elderly that in precarious situation. He's always trying to get clothing and books, and he has like a cornucopia, because we are all contributing, and we know that the donation we supply will have a good end, will get to the hands of those who really need. Well, my question is actually a matter of personal curiosity. Once a day that we sit to take a coffee, I can ask you. But I also would like to highlight how important this strategy of connecting different collectives. And I will briefly talk about an experience of one person of Hermanas en la Sombra collective that is close to a church that fostered the hate against diversity. Acacia, well, lesbianism is a common practice, and she was resistant, refused, and during the pandemics, we said, well, you have to feed other people. And by working together with Alfonso, transformed her these homophobic feelings she used to have, and she started to sympathize with people regardless of their sexual orientation. And the work of Aida with mothers of disappeared people, and this whole collective melting pot that we share with other collective allows us to permeate in through the different and beautiful missions, all of them with a lot of sense, and this in make us richer as collective. Lucy, thank you very much for your enthusiasm. Aida, thank you to be here, your presence, your discipline, your goodwill. I love it in this goodwill, this go for it in people. And to all my brothers and sisters that we had opportunity to meet sometimes, uh, may this be the beginning of new meetings and that will enrich us and will move us as I was by my friend Alfonso. Thank you. Thank you.
Yo tengo una última pregunta, si puedo.
I have a last question, if I may.
Estoy ahora mismo dando
I'm
clases sobre la decolonialidad y una de las cosas
giving a class about decolonialization that was inspired by the work of Hermanas en la Sombra. And one of the things that you mentioned in your presentation, was the idea of struggling against the two virus is actually a fight against ignorance. And I was thinking about the situation because you are inserted in the educational Mexican educational system at large. And I was thinking on Mexican education right now.
Estatal, ¿no?
State education, let's say, at all levels. Up to what stage do you think that the state education is contributing to what we can call decolonization of being and knowing, that includes the acceptance of sexual diversity? Up to what stage what we are seeing, especially in the United States right now, is contributing to more exclusion, to more ignorance? How your practices how do you fit your practices in relation with state education? Well, this is very important because I work with my social struggle is being with people and their knowledge and their ignorance, not their culture, not their race culture, their ethnic experience, but the academic advancements that, for no doubt, there we talk a lot of people that are skeptical and they do not trust government, any government in the world. So I'm in a place to say that on one hand, vaccines are important and necessary to avoid and decrease the possibility of being contaminated by the virus. Actually, I have to teach. Yes, there is a virus. Yes, it can contaminate people. Yes, it can kill people. And historically, this has always existed. This is not novelty. This is not biological weapon. This is something that comes from nature, from the cycles of life, where we have presence of virus and the evolution of virus and other pathogens. They historically always existed. So the first thing was affirming they exist, they has always existed, they were not created on purpose by humans to kill people, to decrease world population, and so on and so forth. Because in the end of the day, we have 5 million deaths in the year. That actually are not many compared to the 7.5 billion inhabitants of the world. Even so, you have to vaccinate yourself. You have to take caution to avoid contamination. This academically is correct, and this is what we should do. Why? Because this is teaching people to survive, especially elderly that were more susceptible, and as such avoid a major catastrophe that was not in the scale that could be, because in Mexico we are talking about 350,000 people that died in these 2 years. But there are many more dying of other diseases. So I have my personal statistics here. How many died in my city in 2 years? Each week, maybe one person per week, but every day someone dies of cancer. So when we compare this pandemic and we study the reality of mortality in Mexico, in my city, and in the whole world, we realize that actually they are much less than we get afraid of in other diseases. Maybe it was thanks to the academic precautions that we could avoid many more deaths. And this helps to not to have such a terrible mortality as expected. We could have more than 3 to 5 million people dead in Mexico. And we are talking about 5 million, 6 million in the world. So this is already something that we have to discuss. But if the fear of many people, because they want to make us buy medicines or buy masks, well, but this is something that is transitional, as you can see. It seems that it's going away. H1N1 has 10 years already and didn't progress because there was a medicine to treat. But with COVID, there was no medicine. So we are just starting to study it, and the best and most efficient way was vaccine and the efforts of immunological studies. And I would like to highlight, there are hundreds of groups, thousands of investigators that wouldn't lie about their research. We can trust. Thank you. Last question that is less academic and more practical. Actually, a rhetorical question, because I don't know if there is an answer. It is, or if it is possible to answer. How do you have time and energy to do all that? I can't grasp. It seems that just by reading your curriculum, Aida said you have the 1,000 fights, but for me it's as of 1,000 lives. How is this possible? Well, this is the willing of giving yourself. In that, I found meaning to my life. I have something to do with my life. I passed through difficult challenges where life was trying me, and I was able to survive thanks to my faith, to my willing of give myself and edificate myself by teaching people, by telling them that being a homosexual doesn't make me less. I'm a person of light as anyone, and I can give myself to my community, to my people, be useful, be a teacher, to invite other people, other groups to also give their life in a postulate. And if you find meaning in your life, this is the best way to live. Congratulations for all your work. And well, we continue with this fight. Thank you. It is the best way to close the cycle of sessions. This seems to be the 7th and I believe the last one. So thank you very, very much for closing it in such an inspiring way. Thank you for this invitation, Elena, Aida, all of those here present. Big hugs, and I embrace you. Thank you for hearing me. I have always been a lot, really transparent and spiritual, and this is what rescue us as human beings. This is the biggest honor in presence of the Creator. I this is always something that I want to wake up in every person because this will make a better world. Thank you. And in the chat, we can see the video of the co-organizer, Catherine, that is in the Netherlands, and Amy that said it is fascinating. So once again, thank you very much and see you in the next one. Bye.